Hello everyone, so today I'm going to cover SEO with Sitecore, which is a pretty popular topic from what I've seen. I have a blog that actually talks about a lot of the topics I'm going to cover today, but I'm going to kind of walk through some of the coding examples of working with SEO. So one thing I will not be covering in this is off-page SEO. If you already have a strategy in place, you're not going to really be impacted by the use of Sitecore. You're going to need to know some of the things I'm going to discuss, such as the item names and how those are generated, and what you will need to pull into your practice of creating off-page links. But beyond that, Sitecore has no impact on that whatsoever. Some of the things that we will be discussing are quite a few different topics about on-page SEO, either affecting the item links, the links that are actually generated, and dealing with duplicate content, which is definitely a factor when it comes to Sitecore, and also to deal with some of the other implications, such as mobile-friendly website that can definitely has a impact on Google's search engine, especially as they've moved to providing a different search result based off mobile, and also on just efficiency and performance of Sitecore, because even though that doesn't really matter in terms of some search engines, it definitely matters in terms of kind of from a usability standpoint. So if somebody comes to your page and it takes 10 seconds to load, Google doesn't want that to happen, because that means the user isn't going to have a friendly or a good experience on your site, so they're not going to show that result as often, or even maybe remove it altogether if your site's taking that long to load. So most of the sessions I'm going to cover today are ones I'm going to have little quick demos on, how to make the changes in Sitecore, but some other ones I'm not going to cover too much. I'm going to show in future sessions how we might make changes to those. So the first one is the item name versus display name. So when you create a item inside Sitecore, at a default instance, this is a fresh, I haven't made any changes to what I'm about to show you. And I call it article new, and notice the space. And I click OK. It's going to create a article new, and it's going to have item path of article new with a space in it. This is not good. We don't want spaces in our paths, because what's going to happen is this page will sit under this URL right here. So /blog/2017/article new with space in it. What we'd like to have happen is any spaces should be replaced with hyphens. And ideally, the item name should also be lowercase. We can control that through the creation of what I'm about to show you, with the display name becoming an item name and being more friendly, or you can also do that for the link manager, which I'll show you in a little bit. But let's start with this. So our objective is we still would like to be able to type article new, because this would be a good display name versus these up here, which are using the item name, which is SEO friendly, this Acme-A all lowercase, but it's kind of hard to read. So we'd still like to have a kind of friendly display name, but have a more friendly SEO name as well. So to pull that off is we're going to kind of piggyback into the events that are created. So to do that, we'll start out by creating a patch config for the events. So I'll create an events config, and in here I will just create the standard configuration patch, which will be and then the next part is the Sitecore part and events naming level custom. create an event. I'm only going to show the item added one today, but you'd probably want to do item rename as well. And I'm not patching the actual current ones that are existing. I'm just going to add a new event handler to this, so the existing ones will still take place, but this one will be added at the end. So handler type. So I'll call this example.infrastructure events.item handler. And then I have to give it a method that's going to call, and I'm going to call item added. So that's it for the patch config. So then I will now create that method that I called it. So I'll just create a new folder. I'll call it events. And then I will give it a class of item handler. So, and then I'll do here public method, and I'll do some protected void on item added object sender event args. And I'll just include a reference to Sitecore.events. And then what I'm trying to do is get the item that's trying to save, or when I'm saying on item added, it's now going to pass me the item that it's trying to add. Let's do some casting here. Event dot extract parameter args 0, and then we'll do a set friendly item name. So this additional property or method, private void set friendly item name, text an item. So first would be I want to kind of, so when this runs, it's going to run in the master tree, it's going to run in the core, it's going to run maybe for templates, layouts, things like that. You may want that scenario, but you may not. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create some conditional logic. So if item.database.name does not equal master. So if it's anything else, so I'm basically going to create a return statement here. So I'm going to kick out everything that I don't want. So I don't want anything that's not master. And then I will do item.path that starts with so basically I'm saying anything that starts with anything other than that path should get kicked out as well. So I only want stuff that's in the master database, that's in the Sitecore content tree. So I'll just return. Now I can start doing the actual logic. So what I want to do is I want to get a real item name. So let's just call this real item name. So then I'm going to take the item.name, but I'm going to also replace spaces with dashes, and I'm going to lower it. So now I need to save the item. So to handle the scenarios I want. So item.editing.begin edit. a semicolon back there. I'm going to do a try catch block or try finally block because if it fails, I don't want any issues there. So lastly, I will now handle the changing the items that I want. So the one that came in, item.appearance.display name, I want this to be the item.name. So if I gave it the name here and now with spaces in between, it's going to take that item name, which was the item name, and it's going to put that as the display name. Next, I want to make the item name equal to the real item name, which is going to be the item name, but it's going to strip out the spaces and make hyphens and add a $2. Now you probably want to use some sort of regex pattern here instead to replace other scenarios, but this works as well, just to kind of showcase this. So that's it. I'm going to go ahead and do a publish to my project. And I'll need to do a refresh. All right, so now it's refreshed, and now we should be able to showcase what we did. So this only will work on creation of an item. So if I rename this, it won't work. But like I said, you should do it to the rename as well. So if you renamed it to article new 2 with spaces, you'd want it to create the appropriate item name as well. And keep in mind, this will only work on events that you're handling, such as item create or item rename, etc. So if you had existing items here that were not in the right format, you'd be in trouble. So you'd have to go back and rename them all or whatever it may be. So I typically would recommend doing this to a fresh install of Sitecore. So if you're starting a new project, add this feature in. Then you never have to think about it again. So I'll just create one called article with spaces. I'm going to save that. And now you'll see that it's actually got a little bit more description up here in the item name. So the item name is now called article with spaces, all lowercase. And the display name is now article with spaces, the original thing that we typed in. And you'll see over here, it's still a friendly name, but the item name is more of a SEO friendly or even a readability standpoint, more friendly. So that's it for that topic. The next topic is going to be the link manager. So the link manager is, building links inside Sitecore is all handled by one provider, which is the link provider. This is what we're going to extend. So when it creates links for all parts of your website, what we really want is those links to all be standardized to one set guide. If you went in and you didn't set this, you might end up with different links in different parts of your site. You might end up with, on the home page, it links to an article that has /en/article name, like en/article with spaces. And then on another page, it might just be /article with spaces. We don't really want those variations. Also, as I'm going to explain as we create this, if we go back to Visual Studio, we also want maybe the ability to customize this further. If we want, for example, if we have buckets and we don't want the bucket URLs, like we don't want the month and the year inside that item name path or the URL, then we can actually strip those out as well. Or we can strip those out using code. I'd also recommend maybe providing additional options that you can change through the configuration or even directly from Sitecore to allow the user to select that on or off. So if, for example, if they're on the blog and they want that option, then maybe the bucket itself has an option to turn on removing the URL, the bucket structure from the URLs. but I'm not going to cover that. I'm just going to cover creating a quick scenario of creating the link manager. Pretty straightforward session, and really most of it is done via a patch config. So I will call this link manager.config, and I will just do the standard patching logic. So now I'm going to start patching the logic here. So I'm going to patch an attribute. That attribute is called default provider, and it's called custom. Currently it's set to, I think it's just set to like default or something like that. We're going to change it to custom. And then we will define that provider right here. First, I'm going to clear out all the existing providers because we don't need to really have them all provided or listed, since we're just adding a new one and we only want this one to be used. We'll call it custom to match the default provider. The type will be, like I said, we can do a custom class that can add additional functionality, but we don't really need this necessarily. Add ASPX extension. This is kind of a best practice from the SEO perspective. We want to add .aspx to all our URLs, so we'll just say false. Always include URL. I always typically set this to false. You could set it to true if you wanted the full URLs for everything. One thing I will note is if you set this to false, if you're in a scenario where you maybe have a add this component, and that add this component needs a full URL. For example, if you're sharing something with Twitter, you need the full URL. You can't just do / whatever. You need to do HTTPS, the full URL / whatever. So if you need to make changes to that, these custom options, you can actually new up these options and then just change one of the parameters, such as this always include server URL, and then it would include the server URL for just that one situation where you need the full absolute URL. Some of these are just obvious ones. Language embedding. I'm going to set this to never. So what is language embedding? This depends on your scenario. So if you're running your plan is to have one domain that has several languages on it. So maybe you're a corporate website and you have locations all over the world, and that main website should have, it should have language versions in all the different languages, but it's all going to be under the same domain. Then what you might want is, abc.com/en/about us versus abc.com/ess/about us. So that may make sense in that scenario. So in that scenario, you might want to make sure language is actually embedded in all URLs, and you just change this. I believe it's to always instead of never. But for most situations and most websites I've been a part of, their intent is to, if they do have another language for other parts of their site, they will actually have another domain for that. So there's no point in including the language in the URLs, because the domain is what's handling that determination. So, and also you might run into a lot of weird duplicate content issues if you also enable that, because you'd have more variations of your languages. People might start thinking, well, I can change /en to /esses to see the content, and they would see the different content because Sitecore doesn't really prevent that. So just something to keep in mind. Now, by default, I was referring to having the language located in the file path. You can change this to other options as well. Shorten URLs. This is pretty much always going to be true. I can't think of a scenario where you'd want long URLs, but so a shortened URL is basically going to take that full item path and going to shorten it to what the bare minimums is. Basically, it's going to strip out your start path and your root path out of that, and then that's what your URL is going to be, which is what most websites are going to use. But if you want shortened URLs to be false, it's going to use the full item path name, which is going to be like sitecore/content/ abc.com/ home/ so it's going to be a really long URL, which is kind of redundant and not friendly for SEO at all. Use display name. We're going to set this to false. I don't see a scenario where you'd want to use display name, especially what I just showed you, unless, well, I could see a scenario where you wanted to, if you wanted to have some sort of unfriendly character in your item name, but I don't know why you'd want to do that, because that would not work with your most browsers anyway. So lowercase URLs, we can set this to true. I usually always do. So all our URLs are lowercase. So that's that. That's all been defined. So I'm just going to go ahead and create this structure. So just this, and it's best to overwrite this from link provider, which is, that'd be helpful I spelled that correctly. And then I should probably implement its interfaces, or actually I have to add a reference to configuration. And I'm just going to override it to get item URL. And I'm just going to let it call its base. So I'm overwriting it, and I'm just going to leave it as like that. So it's just going to call its base, and that's just going to run the default logic anyways. So there's no point in adding additional bucket logic here, etc. If item is in bucket, then strip bucket URL, things like that. All right, so next, that kind of covers the link manager. I'm not going to really show that one in use, so I'm going to publish it here in a second. The next one is meta tags. This is actually requires customization. I see occasionally people, a marketer, ask like, how do I enable meta tags? Well, it's a development focused task, and it really depends on your environment. So speaking from a Helix implementation standpoint, and also just from a, this is kind of universal, you're typically going to have some sort of template structure. So for example, I have down here, I have the concept of these base templates. These are like interface templates or base templates defined in Helix. And they would be inherited by different items on a page, or different templates are going to inherit from these base templates, is what I meant to say. So typically you'd want some sort of base page. Now this doesn't a base page should not exist really in a Helix implementation. You'd want something more specific, like what you might want to create for Helix is some sort of base meta tags or base or interface template that's just meta tags or page meta tags or something like that, to just include these specific fields for the page. So the way this would work is once you have some sort of template, some sort of base or interface template that defines like meta tags, you're going to need to add these to your page type templates. Before I worked on Helix, I was doing page type templates. I just wasn't aware I was doing it, but that's a definition item from Helix as well. And you just would create different pages that you need for your site. So let's say you need a home page. We would go to the home page and you would assign the base page to that. Currently the base page contains meta tags. So once I assign that template as a base template to the home template, when I go to use the home item, it now can pull in meta tag information. So home, meta description, meta keywords, etc. So now they can fill in these things. And typically the meta title should be a single line text field. The meta description is a multi-line, and a meta keywords is also a multi-line. You could go really complex and create a meta keywords that contains some sort of multi-list of keywords. I think that's over architecting a solution. I think it should just be standard text. So what I want to do is show how you would add this logic in. So you have it on the current context item, and I'm going to use glass for this, but you could use anything. So first and foremost, we need to make sure we have that data. So let's see here. I don't know what I have currently set up. So I think what I'm going to have to do is I have a base content. I'm going to need a base page. This will basically represent that base template that I created. And this is all glass, like I said. So we're going to have public string meta title, public string meta description, public string meta keywords. We're going to need to define these as Sitecore field, and it should be able to detect what these are as long as the item names match up. Which, let's just confirm that real quick. Meta title, let's go back down to base page, the builder, and let's just make these one-liners. Typically when I make them one-liners, I'd want to go into, or one word, I'd want to go in and just create a title for them so they're easier for the content editors to understand. Although pretty much they could probably comprehend what's going on there, even though they're all one word. So now that's been defined. Now when I'm going back into Visual Studio and defining these, it should be able to detect what field I'm referring to by just doing that. You could specify the ID as well if the property name didn't match up to the template field name, then you might need to use the ID of the field just to make sure that it's picking or pulling the correct one. So there's field ID as an option there. So you just specify field ID, and then it would know which one to pull in based off the ID. So that's that. So lastly, I'm going to add this to the articles. And you can see right now they pull from iBase content. I want to pull from iBase page as well. So I guess I created it as a class instead accidentally. I wasn't paying attention. It shouldn't be public either. So just like that, and now I have the reference. The article inherits from iBase content, iBase page, iGlass base, just to show quickly what I mean by that. So if we go down to article, it's under content, you will see that it's pulling from base content and base buckable item. I should probably inherit from base page as well. In there. So now I should be able to start writing the logic that pulls in these fields, these models. So if I go to a controller, typically what I'll do is I'll create something called a page controller. And I will just create one called, oh, first I'll inherit from base controller, I believe I have one, yep. Which will inherit from glass controller, which will inherit from Sitecore controller, which will inherit from controller, just to bring everything I need for this. So I will have a public action result of meta tags is what I'll call it. It's not the greatest name, because I usually split up the meta description to meta keywords from the title because the way they're rendered is slightly different. So the next thing is I want to get the current context item. So I am going to get context item, and this will be just the iBase page is all I want, because I could specify the iArticle here, or I could specify the iHome here, but what we want in this scenario is we want to pull the context item, and we only want to fill in the base template fields, because we could be on any page and we wouldn't know if it has those fields, but we know that most pages are going to inherit from iBase page. If it doesn't, we just will return null and not even try to fill in the title tags. And if it does, then we'll try to fill it. And I'm going to do a check real quick. I'm just going to return an empty result if the context item is null. So if it can't fill iBase page, then it's going to return null. The context item will equal null, and then I'll just return an empty result. So it's not even going to try to process those meta tags. So now I'm going to go ahead and just, I don't want to use scaffolding for this. I want to just create the page or the view. So page, and then I'm going to give it the MVC partial page razor, and I'm just going to specify meta tags that match the controller action name. So, and I'm going to pass back a iBase page, which I'll need to use a using statement because it doesn't know how to resolve that. Example data models base. And then so I can just do a title tag, and then what I'll do is I will optionally show these based off. So if model dot meta title, and then I'll show the title tag. Now, just something to keep in mind, I'm not going to use the experience editor tags for this, just because these are up in the head area of the document, the HTML document, so it wouldn't make sense to make those experience editable, because there's no way that the page would ever show these. You will have to find another way to do that. I will not do the rest to save time, because this video is getting kind of long. So I will just did the meta title. So I'm just going to do a publish. And back to Sitecore. Have to refresh. Okay. And then I'm just going to trigger. Let's actually just edit one of those articles real quick. So I'll do Acme A. And I'm just going to give it a meta title. And then I will do a publish. And all right, the publish is complete. So what I want to do is I want to go to that article page. I don't have most of the site set up, so I'm just going to copy the item name or the item path. And now I'm going to go to that URL. So like I was referring to before, if you were not to shorten URLs, you'd have this long path created every time you link to an item. Obviously, that is really not a good idea, because all you really need for this is just this. So as you can see, it's loaded the page. I probably need to do I'm going to do a session on using Glass and how to use it with the experience editor, which I'll show why that's all coming out as just raw text, not as HTML. But the important thing to show here is if we view page source, actually the title is not set for this article. Well, I don't know why it's not working, but basically that would come through there. One thing I would like to note is so I showed this, probably you're just initially setting up your project with this, but if you're working on a project where this has already been set up, you want to make sure that you're not, if you're creating this template structure, you're not going to create new fields that are already existing that handle that scenario. So you need to work with your development team, especially if you're a marketer or a C-level employee, such as a CTO or CEO, etc. You need to just work with your development team or your consulting team to just make sure that these fields exist. If they do, you'll need to just make sure you reference them. You could show them this article or this video to kind of help them get to what they need to be able to do. If they do not have it, what you'd want to do is just create an interface template or base template that just includes the fields like I just did, or well, technically they already existed. And then you'd want to pull those into whatever item you want to have those fields. So if you have page templates, you'd want to inherit that base template in those interface or those page type templates. Okay, so that's pretty much it for that topic. Let's move on to the discussion of duplicate content. I'm just going to talk about canonicals and duplicate content. I'm going to eventually do a session on this as well, because there's ways to get around this. I just want to make everyone aware that by default, Sitecore creates a lot of different URLs for a page. So for example, this page, if we went to .aspx, it would work because that's a URL as well. If we went to /en, that would work because it's just a variation of it. Some other ones, I showed you that long path, that would work as well. Even though we are setting the link manager to say, we're not going to, link to those items. The page itself is not smart enough to turn those options off. So it'd be great if it did, but there is an alternative way to handle this using Canonical Tag. you could basically generate something that uses the link manager. The link manager is going to tell you what URL you want to be using. So once you define what that link manager is, you can basically say if current item URL such as en/blog/2017 Acme A does not match that link manager URL, then show a canonical tag and reference the link manager URL. So it's basically telling Google or other search engines that, this page, yes, it's a duplicate of this other page, but the other page is the main page to index and not this one. Don't worry about this page. It's basically what you're doing with that. So I'll show that eventually here. And I'm probably going to provide code for a lot of these enhancements on GitHub at some point, and possibly on. I'm planning on building a Sitecore toolkit. There used to be one, but I'm gonna build a new one that includes some off-page SEO features as well. But anyways, so that's that for that. I'm gonna move on to some other topics. Let's talk about bundling and minification of resources. I'm not, again, going to cover this topic because it's a broader topic. I'm also going to cover this in a future session as well. So when you're putting resources on a page, I don't have any currently, but let's say you had CSS, you had JavaScript, you have jQuery, jQuery Validate, Bootstrap, things like that. They're usually going to include them all one after another. The issue with this is that the more resources you have that's external, you're going to have the server is going to have to pull these each down individually. So each individual request takes additional time. So it's going to have to go out, figure out DNS, figure out, take a handshake to that server, then the server's got to return a result. So all those little requests take additional time. So what you'd really want to do, and although that's not a great example, because if you're going to external servers, you probably still have to have those all as different resources. Although I would recommend pulling them all down unless you're using one that's like a CDN or something like that for jQuery. But I would recommend pulling them down. And then what you can do is you can bundle them together. So you can say with the .NET bundling and minification service, or a code library, I guess, of optimization tools. So you can take all the scripts that you have that are pulling from your local file system, bundle them together, especially if they're all custom code, you can minify all those JavaScript or CSS files together, and then just include them as one path on your web page, which obviously runs and loads a whole lot faster than loading all those resources individually. Also, another advantage to that is in an instance where you're in a production environment and you have typically you're going to have edge caching or some sort of caching setup for your resources, because you don't really want them to be loaded each time. You can just have them cached and then load from that cache. Then what you'd want to do is, since it creates a special URL, if that URL changes, it will update automatically. So if you're using the individual files individually, it may not recycle the cache, and then you might have to go through some sort of manual cache clearing process, or you might even have a scenario where some people have different versions of the CSS because it's cached and you have the newer one, and you're going to go through a lot of headaches, especially if you're a partner and you have clients. You don't really want them to see something differently than what you're seeing. So typically in that scenario, I like to bundle, minify, and then you have a special URL. That bundle or if that bundle changes for any reason, then the URL changes, and then it clears cache instantly because the URL changed. A few other topics, image optimization. I am working currently on a plugin for the marketplace that will, it's basically going to be an image optimization package or module, which will allow you to basically upload images and optimize them, either to provide additional options or to really just reduce the size of them. So something you might want to look into is Tiny PNG or Tiny JPEG, which are services that you can upload an image to it and it will compress them down and you won't be able to notice the difference. And sometimes you can get 50% savings on those images. Like some people like to include large 3 megabyte files or images, and you can get those down quite easily. The larger they are, it seems like the easier you can get them down quite a bit. So you can take that 3 megabyte and get it down to 1 megabyte, and that will drastically increase the performance of your pages from a front end perspective. And then another thing is mobile. So there's the concept of using adaptive versus responsive. This is really a preference, but I think responsive is the best way to go. So adaptive would be using the different devices in Sitecore. I'm going to show this at a later date as well, how to set up different devices and to use more of adaptive approach for handling mobile. So adaptive is basically where you have device tablet, and that tablet would have a completely different PLID, a different setup than the desktop version. The advantages of this is that you could literally serve up different types of content and completely different types of content for different devices. There can be issues with that with SEO, but keeping that many different types, so each page you'd have multiple versions of your page, that's a lot of maintenance requirements there. So I would only recommend, if you only want certain pages to be adaptive, I would make only certain pages adaptive and the rest of the site responsive. But typically we try to navigate towards responsive. And responsive with media queries and things like that, you can definitely still hide. You could have a larger page and just hide certain pieces of content on a lower resolution and things like that. But if you wanted to completely change the way things looked, adaptive is really the only way you can do that. But I definitely recommend either or. I mean, you got to have a mobile strategy nowadays. So you're not going to do well especially within Google, if you don't have a mobile strategy. Next is the 301 strategy. This is another session I'm going to do a course on. So what you'd want is a way you could use IIS rewrite tool to rewrite rules for your website, such as canonicals for www to non-www, or for other broad ranging paths like that. But you don't really want to be in a scenario where you have to make changes to URLs and it has to be done by code or through some sort of config. You'd want it to be handled by Sitecore. So that's what I'm going to show you in a few weeks, is just how I usually configure a 301 redirect module. I'm going to show different types that you can set up and how you can use these. And then last but not least, the last one is really just a overall strategy. This one doesn't relate to Sitecore, and it's just general SEO. So alt tags for images, maybe what you should do is make it a required critical field validation for the description field on the image tags, just to make sure that the content editors are putting those in. Also, you'd want to do some sort of header tags, so H1 has to be on every page, and things like that. There's a lot of little things. I'm not going to go into those in great detail because that's more general SEO, and that just keeps changing. I would definitely stay away from, providing a white background with text behind it in white. That's going to get you banned by Google pretty quickly. I would not keyword stuff. Just make your site seem natural. I wouldn't even worry about SEO really, but you need to worry about how your URLs and things like that from a Sitecore's perspective are coming out. But that's more of a usability thing than anything, in my opinion. So make your site usable, and if you do that, then Google's going to love you, Bing's going to love you, Yahoo's going to love you, which I think is Bing, and other search engines are going to love you. So All right, that concludes today's session. Like I said, I got a few topics coming up related to SEO and some of these other topics I didn't really get to go into fine detail. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through LinkedIn or there some of the other channels that I have links to. And I'll be happy to help you guys with any SEO setups that you are having. If you're trying to add meta tags and you're just having problems, reach out to me. I can help provide guidance and help you get that going. So, all right, that's it.